Hey, hi everyone. Good morning. So, in this session, we'll quickly talk through the importance of logging the request. So, you must have worked on error logging, right, or error monitoring when it comes to two different systems which are integrating. So, in our case, we are dealing with Salesforce and Jira, right? So, whenever we are dealing with two different systems, API is a media to communicate, right? And we need to understand the request, whether it is success, failure, and when we sent out the request, what was the request payload? When we received the response, what was the response payload? These things are very important when it comes to any financial or any important systems, right? Where they need auditing of each and every request response, right? What are the changes related to that? So it's very important to have that logging. Okay, so once, so if I enter something here, right? So say if I enter and click on this fetch issue, so what happens behind the scene is we are aware of these things, right? So this is our flow of code, right? Request, we create a request object, then we create a http channel, we set the method, right? Again we create the response object. Now what we do is like we use that name credential, so we are not using the domain url, our code is secure. Then we are having this endpoint additional parameters. Accordingly we'll get the response from that system, like Jira, right? We set the content type, set the endpoint here, whatever we have defined here we are setting it here, right? Now we are on http, we are sending the request. These steps are going to remain same, right? We are sending the request over http and we get the response. Now what I am doing, whatever response I am getting, I am logging it in some place, so that in future if suppose I say I didn't send the request, or the system says no, I didn't receive the request, so that time we have a mechanism which will full-fledgedly tell us what was the request response, when it was sent, what was the endpoint, what is the name credential that we use, right? What was the application for that, because you can have multiple integrations. Say a finance system having 10 different integration when a user interacts, right? So to maintain all those details, it is very essential that you keep the log of all the request detail. Then here what we are doing, once we get the response, we are parsing that response. So there are various ways to do that, we'll see in another session around that, but specifically this session we are targeting for the request, right? How to log the request. So here what I have done, I have created a separate object called API logger. CD is the prefix that I use for my project, and then I'm passing all those parameters, and accordingly I'm creating. Even here I am putting it in try catch to handle the error log, right? Generally, whenever you are doing something like this, make sure that you are confirmed on the size of the parameters and size of the field, because otherwise within this it might throw an exception. So that's where it becomes essential to handle the exceptions, handle the limits of fields. Now with the help of this, I'll be able to log those requests in that object, and just by creating a small report which I can give to the production support guys, who can monitor on this report. Okay, how many errors are getting there, they can filter it and they can quickly see is there any issue related to authentication, authorization, whether this API is working as expected or not. Looking at this data, things will be very simple to monitor on the integration, right? What was the request payload, what was the response payload, right? Whatever data, what data we got, all these details will come very handy when it comes to auditing. Okay, so if I now say I want to request something, now what I'm doing, I'm passing this to the backend. This apex code is creating that request and sending that request over http, and whatever response is received, that is shown here. Now it should create one entry here. If I refresh, now I have another entry which just got created, right? So here I can monitor those things. You can try putting some dummy values so that you will get error. You can put a ID which doesn't exist. You can put a name credential with incorrect values. There it will give unauthorized error. So all those things you can try and out. But this is very important to make sure that you are maintaining the logs of all each and every request. This becomes very handy for auditing purpose, and there are various things associated with that, right? So if suppose your first request fails, then if you want to handle those scenarios, how many times you want to try that request, basis what is the response code. So those all things we'll be discussing. And also there is one more thing that we will be taking in one of our session in this series is like integration with Google Sheets. So suppose I have this Google Sheet. Here you can see the data, right? I can access the data. If I modify something here, I'll make it 10,000. Okay. Now if I click on this button, what it is doing, it is fetching that details from there. Now say if I want to update this to b11, b22, whatever, right? I can change it to 55, and then I want to update these values from Salesforce. So if I just click of one button, I can form that request. I can just send the details. To see again it got modified. Again I want to fetch that data, I can just say get that data, accordingly it will fetch that data. So this also we are going to see in one of our sessions. So what type of authentication, what is OpenID Connect, what is name credential, external credential. We'll try to cover more and more scenarios. So keep following the sessions. We'll come up with some interesting integrations as well, and to try to increase on our knowledge. Thank you so much.